Evelyn Carter never imagined that something as simple as a weekend invitation could quietly change the entire direction of her life. At first, it looked harmless, elegant even, a chance to meet the family of the man she thought she understood. But sometimes, the most beautiful doors open into places you were never meant to enter. Evelyn was a 42-year-old historian from Chicago, a woman who had built her life on structure, logic, and quiet independence. She didn't believe in fairy tales. Soft chuckle, especially not the kind that came wrapped in wealth and mystery. And yet, when she met Damien Ashbourne, something shifted. He wasn't loud. He wasn't showy. He didn't try to impress her. He simply listened, as if every word she said mattered. And that was the beginning of the problem. Because people like Damien don't exist in isolation. They come from something. Something built. Something protected. Something powerful. The first time Evelyn searched his name, she expected nothing unusual. But instead, she found silence disguised as history. Wealth, influence, political ties, private foundations, estates that didn't appear on public maps. And then, something stranger. Names of women who were once connected to the Ashbourne family, and then were not. No explanations. No records. Just absence. Still, Evelyn told herself not to jump to conclusions. Because love has a way of softening suspicion. When Damien invited her to Martha's Vineyard, he said it like it was simple. A family gathering. A tradition. Nothing more. But the moment Evelyn arrived, she felt it. The silence. Not the peaceful kind. The controlled kind. As if the entire estate was holding its breath. Massive gates opened slowly as her car entered the property, and for a brief moment, she noticed something odd. Security cameras tracking her movement. Not casually. Deliberately. Pause. Like she had already been expected. Inside the mansion, everything was perfect. Too perfect. Polished floors. Cold marble. Portraits that seemed to follow her with their eyes. And then she met her. Vivian Ashbourne. The matriarch. She didn't smile the way normal people smile. It was more like a conclusion had already been made, and Evelyn simply hadn't heard it yet. "Welcome," Vivian said softly. But her eyes said something else entirely. Dinner that night felt like a performance Evelyn hadn't rehearsed for. Wealthy guests, politicians, social elites, and Evelyn, sitting quietly at a table that didn't feel like it had room for her. Damien sat beside her, calm as always, but distant, too distant. At times, he looked like a man trying not to disappear inside his own family. And Evelyn noticed something else. Whenever she spoke, conversations paused. Not politely, strategically, as if her words were being measured, not heard. Later that night, she walked the hallway alone. The mansion was quiet, but not empty. Some silence feels alive. Portraits lined the walls. Generations of Ashbournes staring down at her, judging her, studying her. And for the first time, Evelyn felt something she couldn't explain. Not fear. Awareness. Damien, meanwhile, was nowhere to be found. When she finally saw him again, it was late. He stood in a dim study room, holding an old photograph. He didn't hear her enter. For a moment, he wasn't the controlled man she had met. He was something else. Something burdened. Something trapped. Long pause. And then he noticed her. And the mask returned instantly. Too fast. Too practiced. Days passed, and Evelyn began noticing patterns. Whispers when she entered rooms. Silences when she asked questions. Glances exchanged when Damien left her side. And always the feeling of being observed. Not openly. Quietly. Patiently. Then came the moment everything shifted. She found a photograph. A woman she had never seen before, standing beside Damien. Smiling. Familiar. Alive. But according to everyone else, she didn't exist. That was the first time Evelyn stopped trusting coincidence. And somewhere inside that mansion, Vivian Ashbourne already knew. She had always known. Because in families like this, nothing enters by accident. Not guests. Not questions. And certainly not Evelyn Carter. And what Evelyn didn't realize yet was that she wasn't there to meet a family. She was there to be understood, assessed, and quietly placed into a story that had already been written long before she arrived. Evelyn Carter told herself it was probably nothing. A photograph, a misunderstanding, maybe even a family mistake. But deep down, she knew something about that explanation didn't sit right. Because the way Vivian Ashbourne looked at her now had changed. Not openly. Subtly. Like a scientist observing a reaction that had already begun. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. The mansion was too quiet. And yet, not empty. Every sound felt intentional. A door closing somewhere far away. Footsteps that stopped the moment she listened. A distant hum of movement behind walls too thick to reveal anything. And Damien was still not beside her. When she finally saw him the next morning, he looked different. More controlled. More distant. Almost like the man from yesterday had been carefully put back in place overnight. She tried to ask him about the photograph. He paused. Just for a moment. That small pause said more than his words ever could. It's complicated, he said softly. And then he smiled. But it didn't reach his eyes. That same day, Evelyn met Claire Holloway. Claire arrived like someone who already belonged there. Perfect posture. Expensive confidence. A smile that felt rehearsed. And when she saw Evelyn, she didn't hide her reaction. She laughed softly. Not cruelly. Worse than that. Like she was amused by something Evelyn hadn't figured out yet. So, you're the one, Claire said lightly. Evelyn blinked. The one. Claire tilted her head slightly. Let's just say, you arrived at a very interesting time. And then she walked away, leaving silence behind her. By afternoon, Evelyn started noticing something more unsettling. Staff avoided her more directly now. Conversation stopped entirely when she approached. Even Damien's presence felt different, like he was standing between her and something else. Something she hadn't seen yet. That evening, Vivian Ashbourne invited Evelyn to tea. It sounded innocent. It wasn't. The room was smaller than the rest of the mansion. Intimate. Controlled. A space designed for conversations that were meant to feel personal, but never truly were. Vivian poured tea slowly, carefully, and then she finally spoke. You are not the first woman Damien has brought here. Evelyn didn't respond. She waited, because something in Vivian's tone suggested the sentence wasn't finished yet. There was another, Vivian continued softly. Elegant. Intelligent. Very much like you. A long pause. And she also believed she understood this family. Vivian finally looked at her directly. And then she left. Evelyn felt her stomach tighten. Left? She asked quietly. Vivian nodded. Yes, that's what we call it. But something in the way she said it didn't sound like leaving. It sounded like erasure. That night, Evelyn confronted Damien again. This time, she didn't wait for comfort. She showed him the photograph. The one that shouldn't exist. The woman smiling beside him. Alive. Damien froze. Completely. For the first time, his composure broke. Not dramatically. Not loudly. But in a silence that felt heavier than anything he had ever said. That shouldn't be here, he said quietly. Evelyn stepped closer. Then explain it. Damien looked away. And for the first time, he didn't have an answer ready. Hours later, Evelyn did something she shouldn't have. She followed him. Through the hallway. Down a corridor she had never been allowed to notice properly before. And past a door that wasn't locked. What she found inside wasn't just a room. It was a history. Boxes. Files. Records. Names. Dates. Photographs. Women connected to the Ashbourne family over decades. And each file ended the same way. Missing. Disappeared. Unaccounted for. Evelyn stepped back slowly. Because suddenly, the mansion didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like a system. A pattern. A cycle. And then she heard it. Footsteps outside the room. Slow. Measured. Deliberate. She didn't move. She didn't breathe. The door handle turned slightly. And stopped. Silence. Then, footsteps walking away. As if whoever it was already knew she was inside. The next morning, everything was normal again. Too normal. Damien smiled. Vivian was polite. Claire was absent. And no one mentioned anything that had happened. Not even indirectly. That was when Evelyn understood something important. In this house, nothing was ever confronted. Only managed. Only contained. But Evelyn was no longer just a guest. She had seen too much. And the moment that realization settled in, someone else in the house realized it too. Because somewhere deep inside the Ashbourne Estate, a decision had already been made. And Evelyn Carter was no longer being welcomed. She was being evaluated. Quietly. Carefully. For what came next. And that night, for the first time, Evelyn's room door didn't fully close. Evelyn Carter stood frozen in that hidden room beneath the Ashbourne Estate, surrounded by files that should not exist. Names. Dates. Women. Entire lives reduced to paper records stored in silence. Each folder told a story, but none of them ended properly. They didn't end with closure. They ended with absence. Pause. And for the first time, Evelyn understood something she had been refusing to accept. This wasn't a family with secrets. This was a family built on them. Her hands trembled slightly as she moved from file to file. Each one felt heavier than the last. Photographs of smiling women, vacation images, gala appearances, all of them standing beside Ashbourne men who looked proud, untouchable, respected. And then, nothing. No follow-up records. No public updates. No explanations. Just disappearance disguised as silence. A sound above her made her stop. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. Deliberate. Evelyn stepped back instinctively, pressing herself into the shadow between shelves. The footsteps stopped. Then, a slight creak from the floor above. Someone was standing directly over her. She didn't move. Didn't breathe. And then, the footsteps faded away. As if whoever it was already knew she was there, but chose not to act. When Evelyn finally left the room, she didn't run. She walked slowly, carefully, because something about this house had changed. Not physically, but in the way it responded to her presence. Like it was no longer hiding things from her. It was preparing her. That night, she couldn't eat. Damien noticed immediately. He sat across from her in silence for a long moment before speaking. "You're quiet tonight." Evelyn looked at him, and for the first time, she didn't soften her expression. "I found the room," she said. A pause. A long one. Damien didn't ask which room. That told her everything. His jaw tightened slightly. Not anger. Not surprise. Something closer to resignation. "I told you not to look too deeply into things here," he said quietly. Evelyn leaned forward. "No," she replied softly. "You told me nothing at all." Silence. Heavy. Controlled. Damien stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the dark ocean beyond the estate. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, almost quietly, "There are things in this family that don't get explained." Evelyn's voice sharpened slightly. "Like the women who disappear?" That stopped him. Completely. And in that pause, Evelyn saw it. Not denial. Not confusion. Recognition. Damien turned back slowly. His voice dropped. "You don't understand what you're standing inside of." Evelyn replied without hesitation. "Then make me understand." A long silence followed. The kind that doesn't feel empty, but occupied, like something unspoken is sitting between two people. Finally, Damien spoke. "My family doesn't just protect its reputation," he said. "It protects its structure." Evelyn frowned slightly. "What does that mean?" Damien hesitated, then answered carefully. "It means nothing leaves the system unless it's controlled." A chill passed through the room. Evelyn slowly sat back. Controlled. That word didn't feel like explanation. It felt like confirmation. Before she could respond, a soft knock came at the door. 3 taps. Perfectly timed. Damien didn't move. Evelyn looked toward the door, then back at him. His expression had changed again. Calm. Composed. Too composed. He walked to the door and opened it. Claire Holloway stood outside, smiling faintly. But her eyes were not smiling at all. "I didn't interrupt anything, did I?" she asked softly. Her tone carried amusement, but also certainty, as if she already knew the answer. Her gaze shifted to Evelyn. Up and down. Slow. Measuring. Then she chuckled lightly. A soft sound. Almost polite. "You really do look like her," Claire said. Evelyn frowned. "Like who?" Claire's smile faded slightly. "Oh, I'm sure Damien hasn't told you about her yet." The air changed immediately. Damien stepped forward slightly. "Claire," he said firmly. But Claire ignored him. Instead, she looked at Evelyn directly. "The one before you." A pause. "The one who asked too many questions." Evelyn felt her stomach tighten. "Where is she?" she asked quietly. Claire tilted her head. A faint smile returned. "That depends on what you believe happens to people who try to leave this family." Silence again. This one sharper. Heavier. Damien's voice broke through it. "Enough." Claire raised her hand slightly. "Relax," she said softly. "I'm just reminding her what she walked into." Then she turned to leave, but paused at the doorway, just long enough to add one more sentence. "You don't leave the Ashbourne world, Evelyn." A pause. "You get accounted for." Then she walked away. Evelyn stood still, her mind trying to process the words. Not emotionally, logically, but nothing about it fit into logic anymore. Damien closed the door slowly. When he turned back, his face had changed again. Not softer, not harder, just tired, like something in him had been worn down over a very long time. "You should have never come here," he said quietly. Evelyn looked at him, and for the first time, her voice didn't shake. Then why did you bring me? That question hung in the air, unanswered. Damien didn't respond immediately, and in that silence, Evelyn understood something far worse than anything she had discovered so far. He didn't just belong to this place. He was tied to it, and leaving was not as simple as walking out, because somewhere inside the Ashbourne Estate, a decision had already been made, and Evelyn Carter was no longer being watched as a guest. She was being measured as a problem, and problems in the Ashbourne world never remain unsolved for long. After Claire Holloway left that room, nothing felt the same again. Not because something new had been revealed, but because everything Evelyn had already seen now had a different meaning. A darker one, a more connected one, like scattered pieces slowly forming a picture she was never meant to complete. Damien didn't speak for a long time. He just stood there, near the window, watching the ocean outside the estate as if it could somehow answer questions he himself refused to face. Evelyn finally broke the silence. "Tell me the truth," she said quietly. Damien didn't turn around, and for a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer at all. Then, almost in a whisper, "You don't understand what my family is capable of." A pause. Evelyn stepped closer. "Then explain it to me like I do." That made him turn slightly. Not fully, just enough for her to see his expression shift. Tired, conflicted, trapped. "There are systems," Damien said slowly, "that don't survive honesty." Evelyn frowned. "That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give you." Silence again. But this time, it felt different. Not empty. Restrained. Like something was being held back deliberately. That evening, Evelyn made a decision. She would no longer wait for answers. She would find them herself. The mansion was quieter than usual. Not peaceful. Controlled quiet. The kind that makes you aware of every step you take. Every breath you release. Every sound you might be making without realizing it. Evelyn moved through the hallway alone. Portraits lined the walls again. The Ashbourne family, watching her. Generations of faces frozen in time. Wealth, power, legacy, and something else underneath it. Control. She stopped in front of one portrait longer than the rest. A younger Vivian Ashbourne. Same eyes, same stillness. But in this image, there was something almost softer. Not kindness. History. Evelyn continued walking, until she noticed something unusual. A door she had not seen before. Not hidden, not locked, just unnoticed, which somehow felt worse. She pushed it open. Inside was a small private sitting room. No lights on, just moonlight spilling through tall windows. And sitting inside, waiting, was Vivian Ashbourne. Evelyn froze. She hadn't been seen. Not yet. Vivian was seated calmly, as if she had been expecting this exact moment. Teacup in hand. Perfect posture. Completely still. Without looking up, Vivian spoke. "You've been walking the house like you're trying to understand it." A pause. Her voice was calm, controlled. "You won't." Evelyn stepped inside slowly. "I think I deserve answers," she said carefully. That made Vivian finally look at her. And when she did, it wasn't anger. It wasn't surprise. It was assessment. Like Evelyn was something being measured for value. "You think answers are given," Vivian said softly. "In families like mine, they are managed." Evelyn's voice tightened slightly. "What does that mean?" Vivian placed her teacup down gently and smiled. Not warmly. Precisely. "It means," she said, "that nothing inside this family exists without purpose." A pause. "Not even you." Those words landed heavily. Evelyn didn't respond immediately, because something about the way Vivian said it didn't feel like a threat. It felt like confirmation. Evelyn took a slow breath. "Did you invite me here?" she asked. Vivian tilted her head slightly. "No," she replied calmly. Then a pause. "But I allowed you to come." That silence after her words felt heavier than anything before it. Evelyn felt her chest tighten. "What are you talking about?" Vivian stood slowly. Every movement deliberate, controlled, like someone who never needed to rush anything in her life. "You believe you met my son by chance," Vivian said softly. Evelyn didn't answer, because she suddenly wasn't sure anymore. Vivian walked toward her slowly. "You believe he chose you." Another pause. "But Damien does not choose freely." She stopped just a few steps away and looked directly into Evelyn's eyes. "He never has." A silence followed that felt wrong. Not quiet. Pressurized. Like the air itself had shifted. Evelyn stepped back slightly. "Where is he?" she asked. Vivian's expression didn't change. "He's where he always is when decisions are being made." A pause. "Between obedience and consequence. Evelyn's voice lowered. Consequence of what? Vivian studied her for a moment, then answered quietly. Of belonging to this family. For the first time, Evelyn felt it clearly. Not confusion, not curiosity, but something closer to recognition. She was not learning about a family. She was inside a structure that had already decided its rules long before she arrived. Vivian turned slightly away. And you, she added softly, are the newest variable. That word stayed in the air. Variable. Not guest. Not partner. Not outsider. Something to be evaluated. Something to be categorized. Something still unresolved. Evelyn swallowed. I'm not staying here, she said firmly. Vivian didn't react. Instead, she smiled faintly again. Almost sadly. You already have, she replied. A pause. A long one. Then Vivian added one final sentence before walking back toward the shadows of the room. Now we just need to see what you become. Evelyn stood still as Vivian disappeared into the dim light. And for the first time since arriving at the estate, she no longer felt like she was trying to understand a family. She felt like she was inside a test. And somewhere deeper in the mansion, Damien Ashbourne was still absent, still silent, still caught between something he could not escape. And Evelyn Carter now understood something she didn't want to accept. This wasn't about love anymore. It never had been. It was about control, and she had already been placed inside it. After Evelyn left Vivian Ashbourne's private sitting room, she didn't return to her own thoughts the same way again. Something had shifted, not in the mansion, in her understanding of it. Because now, every conversation felt calculated, every silence felt intentional, and every person inside that estate felt like they were holding something back. Evelyn walked through the corridor slowly, replaying Vivian's words over and over in her mind. You are the newest variable. Not a guest. Not family. A variable. It was the first time Evelyn felt like she wasn't inside a relationship anymore. She was inside a system. That night, Damien finally returned. But he didn't return as the man she had met in New York. He returned quieter, heavier, like something inside him had been pressed down repeatedly until it stopped resisting. Evelyn stood near the edge of the room when he entered. Neither of them spoke immediately. There was a long silence between them, the kind that doesn't feel empty, but full of everything unsaid. Finally, Evelyn broke it. I spoke to your mother. That was all she said. Damien stopped walking, just for a second, but Evelyn noticed. He exhaled slowly. Not surprise, not anger, something closer to resignation. I figured you would, he said quietly. Evelyn stepped forward. She said I was a variable. Damien looked away immediately. That reaction told her everything she needed to know. She also said, Evelyn continued, her voice tightening slightly, that you don't make choices freely. A pause. Damien didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, he walked toward the window again. That window. The same ocean view. The same distance. The same escape he never used. I grew up here, he said finally. His voice was low, controlled, careful. Evelyn stayed silent. Because she knew now, this wasn't just explanation. It was confession. Damien continued. You think you understand wealth, power, influence. A small pause. But what you don't see is what holds it together. He turned slightly, not fully facing her. Just enough. Obedience, he said. One word. Heavy. Final. Evelyn frowned. That's not normal. Damien let out a soft breath, almost like a humorless chuckle. No, he replied. It isn't meant to be. Silence filled the room again. But this time, it felt different. Less mysterious. More dangerous. Evelyn stepped closer. So what happens when someone doesn't obey? She asked. That question changed everything. Damien didn't answer immediately. And in that pause, Evelyn saw something she had not seen before. Fear. Not loud. Not visible. Controlled fear. The kind that has been carried for too long. They don't disappear the way people think, Damien said quietly. A pause. They get redirected. Evelyn's voice lowered. Redirected where? Damien finally looked at her. And for the first time, his calm cracked slightly. Not fully. Just enough to be real. Out of sight, he said. Another pause. And out of influence. Evelyn shook her head slightly. That's not an answer. Damien stepped forward now. Closer. His voice sharper than before. It's the only answer that keeps you alive in this house. That sentence hung between them. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Final. Evelyn didn't step back. Instead, she held his gaze. You're afraid of them, she said quietly. Damien didn't deny it. He didn't confirm it either. But the silence said everything. A long pause followed. Then Damien spoke again, but softer this time. You shouldn't be here anymore, Evelyn. That wasn't a suggestion. It was warning. Evelyn's voice dropped. Then let me leave. Damien closed his eyes briefly. Just for a moment. Like that request physically hurt. You don't understand, he said quietly. Evelyn didn't move. Then make me understand. Damien opened his eyes again. And this time, something inside him finally shifted. Not dramatically, but enough to break something that had been holding him together for years. There was someone before you, he said. Evelyn froze. Damien continued. She didn't just ask questions. A pause. She started documenting everything. Evelyn felt her chest tighten. And Damien looked away again. And when he spoke next, his voice was almost gone. She tried to leave. Silence. Evelyn whispered. What happened to her? Damien didn't answer immediately. And that delay was the answer. Even before he spoke. Finally, he said it. I don't know exactly. A pause. But I know she didn't leave freely. That sentence changed the air in the room completely. Evelyn stepped back slightly now. Not fear. Realization. So when Claire said I look like her, Damien nodded slowly. Evelyn swallowed. And Vivian calling me a variable. Another pause. Damien finished it for her quietly. They're comparing outcomes. A silence followed that felt too heavy for the room it was in. Evelyn's voice softened. So what am I supposed to be? Damien looked at her for a long time. Long enough that the silence became its own answer. Then he finally said, I think they're deciding whether you stay or get rewritten. That word landed differently. Not metaphorically. Systemically. Evelyn turned slightly away, trying to process it. But nothing about it made emotional sense anymore. Only structural sense. And that was the most dangerous kind. Damien stepped closer again, but his voice softened. For the first time, he wasn't speaking like someone delivering information. He was speaking like someone asking for forgiveness without saying the word. Please, he said quietly. You need to leave this place before it decides what role you belong in. Evelyn looked at him. Really looked at him. Not as a mystery anymore, but as someone trapped inside it. And then she said something that surprised even herself. I can't leave until I understand it. Damien closed his eyes again. And this time, he didn't open them quickly, because he knew what that meant. And somewhere deeper in the Ashbourne Estate, something had already begun adjusting to Evelyn Carter's refusal. Quietly, patiently, like a system recalculating a problem it had not yet solved. And this time, it was no longer about whether she belonged. It was about what the system would do to make sure she either did or never left with the truth. After that conversation with Damien, Evelyn stopped seeing the mansion as a place. It stopped feeling like walls and rooms, and started feeling like something else entirely. Something aware, something responsive. She no longer walked through corridors normally. She listened first, then moved, then listened again, because now she understood something crucial. Nothing inside the Ashbourne Estate happened without being noticed. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep, not because she was afraid in the traditional sense, but because her mind refused to accept how organized everything suddenly felt. Every silence, every absence, every delayed answer. It all pointed to one thing. Control. Around 2 a.m., she heard it. A soft knock at her door. 3 taps. Measured. Deliberate. Not urgent. Controlled. Evelyn didn't move immediately. She waited. Listening. Nothing followed. No footsteps. No voices. Just silence again. Then, the handle turned slightly. Not fully. Just enough to confirm it had been tried. Evelyn stepped back slowly. And for the first time since arriving, she realized something terrifying. She wasn't alone in her room. Not in presence. In awareness. The next morning, Damien was gone again. But this time, Evelyn didn't ask where. She already knew the answer wouldn't help her anymore. Instead, she made a decision. She would stop reacting and start searching properly. She began with the estate records. Not digital. Physical. Because something about this family told her they trusted paper more than systems. More permanent. More controlled. In the lower study archive, Evelyn found what looked like a restricted section. No signs. No labels. Just older shelves, pushed deeper than the rest. As if intentionally separated. And there, she found it. A set of folders marked only with initials. Not full names. Just coded references. Her hands moved slowly as she opened the first one. Inside was a photograph. A woman. Smiling. Standing beside Damien. Evelyn froze. Because she recognized her. Not personally, but from memory, from conversations, from avoidance. This shouldn't exist, she whispered. And then she saw the date. 3 years earlier. The same time Claire mentioned. The same time Vivian avoided. The same time Damien went silent. Evelyn turned the page. Another photo. Same woman, but different expression. Less confident, less certain. Then another document. Medical clearance forms. Travel logs. Financial records. And then, a gap. A sudden stop in documentation. No explanation. No continuation. Just absence. Evelyn felt her throat tighten, because now she understood something deeply uncomfortable. This wasn't missing information. It was removed information. And before she could process further, a sound echoed behind her. A slow step. Then another. Evelyn didn't turn immediately. She already knew someone was there. Not guessing. Knowing. A calm voice finally broke the silence. You weren't supposed to find that section. It was Claire Holloway. Evelyn slowly turned around. Claire stood at the end of the aisle. Perfectly composed. Calm smile. But eyes that didn't match it. Evelyn tightened her grip on the folder. I think I have the right to know what happened to her, she said firmly. Claire tilted her head slightly. Almost amused. You really don't understand, do you? Claire said softly. Evelyn didn't respond. She waited. Claire stepped closer. Slowly. Deliberately. And lowered her voice. In this family, people don't disappear because something went wrong. They disappear because something went right. That sentence hit differently. Not emotionally. Logically. Like a rule being revealed. Evelyn frowned. That doesn't make sense. Claire smiled faintly. It does if you understand the purpose. A silence followed. Thick. Controlled. Uncomfortable. Then Claire added something quieter. You think you're the first woman to ask questions like this? A pause. You're not even the first this year. Evelyn's chest tightened slightly. What happened to them? Claire exhaled softly. Almost like she was tired of repeating history. They reach a point, Claire said slowly, where they stop being useful. Evelyn stepped back slightly. You're talking about people like their systems. Claire didn't deny it. In this house, she said calmly, that's exactly what they are. A long silence followed. Then Evelyn asked the question she didn't want to ask. Where is Damien right now? Claire's expression changed slightly. Not fear. Not hesitation. Something closer to restraint. He's being corrected, she said softly. Evelyn frowned immediately. Corrected? Claire nodded. Slowly, as if choosing her words carefully. When someone in this family deviates from expectation, she said, they are reminded. Gently or otherwise. Evelyn felt a cold weight settle in her chest. And what about me? She asked quietly. Claire looked at her for a long moment. Then answered without emotion. That depends on what they decide you are becoming. That sentence lingered longer than anything else in the room. Evelyn looked down at the folder in her hands. Then back up. And for the first time, her voice changed. Not afraid. Not confused. Focused. Then I want to meet the people deciding that. Claire laughed softly. A small sound. Not mocking. Almost sad. Oh, Evelyn, she said gently. You already have. Silence. Then Claire added one final line before stepping away. You just haven't realized who they are yet. And with that, she walked out, leaving Evelyn alone again. But not untouched. Because now Evelyn understood something new. She was no longer just investigating a family. She was being evaluated by it. And somewhere deeper in the Ashbourne Estate, something had already started adjusting again. Not to her questions, but to her persistence. Because in systems like this, curiosity wasn't punished immediately. It was measured first, then categorized, then responded to. And Evelyn Carter had just crossed the point where observation ended. And response began. Evelyn Carter stood still in that quiet archive room long after Claire Holloway had left. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It felt occupied, like the room itself had learned her presence and was waiting to see what she would do next. In her hands, the folder felt heavier than paper should feel, not because of its physical weight, but because of what it represented. A pattern, a system, a history that had been carefully edited over time until only fragments remained. And Evelyn was beginning to understand something she didn't want to accept. Nothing inside this estate was random. Not the conversations. Not the silences. Not even her arrival. Everything had been accounted for long before she ever stepped through the gates. She moved slowly out of the archive room. Each step measured, each breath controlled. But her mind was no longer calm. It was connecting everything now. The photograph. The missing woman. Damien's hesitation, Vivian's cold precision, Claire's quiet certainty. All of it was converging into something that no longer felt like mystery. It felt like structure. That night, Evelyn did not wait for answers. She no longer trusted that answers would be given freely. Instead, she began looking for patterns in the only place she had not fully examined yet, the house itself, because something about the Ashbourne Estate had begun to feel less like architecture and more like design. Intentional design. She walked the corridor alone again. But this time, she was not lost. She was observing. The portraits on the walls no longer felt decorative. They felt arranged, each face positioned with deliberate spacing, as if forming something invisible between them. A message, perhaps, or a reminder. Evelyn stopped near one painting she had passed before but never truly studied. A younger Vivian Ashbourne. Same eyes, same expression, but something subtle had changed in how Evelyn saw her now. Before, Vivian looked like power. Now, she looked like control that had already been tested and proven effective. Evelyn continued walking until she noticed something unusual. A door she had overlooked before. Not hidden, not locked, just unacknowledged. And that felt more intentional than secrecy. She pushed it open. Inside was a small room, barely used. Dim light from a single window, and silence that felt different from the rest of the house. This silence wasn't watching. It was waiting. And then she saw her, Vivian Ashbourne, seated calmly in a chair, as if she had always been there. As if this moment had been scheduled. Evelyn stopped instantly. Her instinct told her to leave. But something deeper told her she was already expected. Vivian did not look surprised. Not even slightly. Instead, she simply observed Evelyn the way one might observe a result that had finally arrived. "You've been moving differently since yesterday," Vivian said softly. Evelyn didn't respond immediately. She waited, because something in Vivian's tone made it clear this was not casual conversation. It was assessment. "I think I deserve to know what is happening here," Evelyn finally said. Vivian's expression didn't change. "That assumption," she replied calmly, "is where most people begin to misunderstand us." Evelyn stepped further inside. "I'm not most people." A faint pause followed. Then Vivian nodded slightly. "No," she agreed. "You're not." That acknowledgement should have felt like validation. Instead, it felt like categorization. Vivian stood slowly, every movement deliberate, controlled, like someone who had rehearsed existence in this environment for a lifetime. She walked past Evelyn without urgency, and spoke without turning back. "You believe you are asking questions," Vivian said. "But what you are actually doing is revealing how you respond under observation." Evelyn frowned slightly. "What does that mean?" Vivian stopped near the window. Outside, the estate grounds stretched into darkness. Still, perfect, uninterrupted. "It means," Vivian said quietly, "that everything you've done since arriving has already been recorded. Not by cameras." Another pause. "By people." Evelyn felt a subtle shift in her chest. Not fear. Recognition. "You're evaluating me," she said slowly. Vivian finally turned and smiled faintly. Not warmly. Not coldly. Clinically. "We are understanding you," she corrected. A pause. "That is not the same thing." Silence followed. A long one. The kind that feels structured, measured, controlled. Evelyn's voice lowered slightly. "And Damien?" Vivian's expression shifted just slightly. Not emotion, but acknowledgement of complexity. "He is not part of your evaluation," Vivian said. Then a pause. "He is part of your environment." That sentence landed differently, because it removed Damien from emotional interpretation and placed him into system function. Evelyn stepped back slightly. "So what am I supposed to be?" Vivian studied her for a long moment. Long enough that the silence between them became heavier than words. Then she finally answered. "That," Vivian said softly, "is what we are still determining." A silence followed that felt irreversible, not because something was said, but because something had been confirmed. Evelyn was not in a relationship, not in a conflict, not in a misunderstanding. She was inside a process, and processes do not pause for emotion. They continue until completion. That night, Evelyn returned to her room differently. Not slowly, not cautiously, but consciously, like someone who now understood that even her movements were part of observation. And when she entered her room, she found the door slightly open, just enough to suggest it had been tested. She closed it slowly and stood still, listening, waiting, because now she understood something deeply unsettling. The Ashbourne Estate was no longer reacting to her presence. It was adapting to it. And somewhere deeper inside the house, Damien Ashbourne was still absent, still unresolved, still caught between silence and consequence. And Evelyn Carter was no longer being introduced to this world. She was being processed by it. And in systems like this, processing is never random. It is always leading somewhere. Evelyn Carter stopped sleeping that night, not because she was afraid of nightmares, but because reality itself had started feeling unreliable. Every corridor in the Ashbourne Estate now felt shorter than before. Every silence felt more intentional. Every door she passed felt like it already knew whether she would open it or not. And Damien was still gone. No message, no explanation, not even a trace of his presence inside the estate. It was as if the house had quietly removed him from her reach, without removing him from the house itself. By morning, Evelyn no longer asked questions out loud. She no longer trusted who might be listening. Instead, she began doing something far more dangerous in a place like this. She stopped reacting and started deciding. She returned to the lower archive one final time, not searching randomly now, searching with intent, because she had seen the pattern. And once you see a system, you stop looking for truth inside conversations. You look for structure. And that is when she found it. A final section, not labeled, not hidden, just separated, as if it had been placed away deliberately, not to conceal it, but to isolate it. Inside were records she had never seen before. Not missing persons files, not photographs, not financial logs, but internal assessments. Names were listed, including hers, Evelyn Carter. Her breath slowed, not from fear, from recognition, because the document didn't describe her life. It analyzed her behavior, her emotional responses, her persistence, her hesitation, even her reactions to specific people in the house. She stepped back slightly, whispering under her breath, "This is not a family. This is a system." And then she saw the final line at the bottom of the page. A classification note. Evelyn froze. The words didn't feel like information. They felt like confirmation of timing. Because suddenly, everything made sense in a way that removed emotion completely. The invitations, the silences, the controlled conversations, Claire's remarks, Vivian's precision, Damien's fear. It was never random. It was staged progression. And Evelyn had reached the final stage. A sound echoed behind her. Slow footsteps. Measured. Deliberate. Not rushed. Not surprised. Expected. She didn't turn immediately, because she already knew. Vivian Ashbourne's voice came softly from behind her. "You understand now." Evelyn turned slowly. Vivian stood at the end of the aisle. Calm. Composed. Completely unsurprised. Evelyn held the folder tighter. "This isn't about family," she said quietly. Vivian nodded slightly. "No." A pause. It never was. Silence filled the archive room. But this silence was different now. It was final. Evelyn's voice trembled slightly, but not with fear. With clarity. "What am I being evaluated for?" Vivian studied her for a long moment, then answered simply. "Stability," she said. "Compatibility." Another pause. "And long-term containment viability." Evelyn blinked slowly. "You're talking about me like I'm property." Vivian didn't deny it. She never needed to. "In systems like ours," Vivian said calmly, "everything that enters must either integrate or be released." Evelyn stepped forward slightly. "And if I refuse both?" Vivian tilted her head slightly, almost gently. "That," she said softly, "is what Damien was supposed to help you understand." At the mention of his name, silence changed. Not louder, heavier. Evelyn whispered, "Where is he?" For the first time, Vivian hesitated. Just briefly, but enough. Then she answered, "He made his choice." Evelyn's chest tightened. "What choice?" Vivian turned slightly away, as if the answer required distance. "To remain within the structure," she said, "and preserve its continuity." Evelyn felt something inside her shift. Slowly, irreversibly. "He chose you?" she asked quietly. Vivian corrected her. "No, he chose us." That sentence landed like an ending that hadn't been announced. Evelyn looked down at the folder again, then back up, and something inside her steadied. Not emotionally, structurally. "If this is a system," she said slowly, "then systems can be understood." Vivian's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, in interest. Evelyn continued, "And if they can be understood, they can be broken." A silence followed, this one different from all the others. Not controlled. Not rehearsed. Uncertain. For the first time, Vivian didn't respond immediately. And in that silence, Evelyn realized something no one had told her. She was not the first to reach this stage, but she might be the first to say this out loud. Vivian finally spoke. You think understanding leads to escape, but understanding is what brought you here. Evelyn didn't look away. Then maybe I'm not trying to escape, she said softly. A pause. Maybe I'm trying to change the outcome. That word changed everything. Outcome. Not escape. Not survival. Outcome. Vivian stared at her for a long moment. And for the first time in the entire story, there was something unreadable in her expression. Not control. Not certainty. Assessment of uncertainty. Then Vivian said something very quietly. You sound like him. Evelyn frowned slightly. Like who? But Vivian had already turned away, walking slowly toward the exit of the archive room. Her final words carried without looking back. Damien said the same thing before he stopped asking questions. Silence. Evelyn stood still, the folder still in her hands, her mind no longer searching for missing pieces, but recognizing the full picture. Damien hadn't disappeared. He hadn't escaped. He hadn't been removed. He had integrated. And that was when Evelyn understood the final truth. Not about the family, not about the mansion, but about the system itself. It did not destroy resistance. It absorbed it. And now, it had reached her. Outside the archive room, footsteps echoed faintly again. Not approaching, not leaving, just present. Evelyn slowly closed the folder. And for the first time since arriving, she did not ask where Damien was, because she already understood. And as the lights of the Ashbourne Estate dimmed into night, Evelyn Carter stood inside a system that no longer needed to observe her, because it had already decided. She was no longer outside of it. She was inside it. And somewhere in the distance, a door quietly clicked shut. Not loudly, not dramatically, just finally. If you stayed until the very end, thank you. And tell me honestly, would you have left the Ashbourne Estate the moment things started feeling strange? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more cinematic stories like this.